This is crazy. Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Okay. Greetings. We're here today to do Senate race, District 39 for the Senate race. And we have Mr. Richard Rose and we have Aungelique Proctor. Aungelique Proctor will be our moderator for today. Aungelique Proctor is reporter for Fox 5 News. Before joining Fox 5 in 1994, this Atlanta native was an investigative reporter for WTLV in Jacksonville, Florida. She also reported an anchor at WKRC in Cincinnati, WMAB in Macon, Georgia, and WALB in Albany, Georgia. But for Aungelique, her broadcasting career first started on a program called The Lawmakers on Georgia Public Television. Before working in front of the camera, Aungelique worked behind the mic in several radio stations in Cincinnati, even served as news director at WCIN. Thank you for being our moderator today. We're going to give Mr. Rose a few minutes for remarks, and then we're going to go on into our debate. Again, I want to thank all the candidates and everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how to share the YouTube.
All right.
I could tweet it out, but that's about it.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Rose, President of Atlanta NAACP. I want to thank these candidates for their effort to be of service. Public service is hard. And so I'm thankful to all of them for the courage and for the commitment that it takes to hold a public office, in particular, either a state rep or state senate in Georgia, which is seems to be a thankless task and is very important. And I thank our Aungelique Proctor for joining us. We're going to both be asking questions. So you got a good side and a bad side. Mine may be a little bit more pointed than hers. I'm the activist here, but I look forward to a lively discussion because this office is important, and you important for wanting to serve. Thank you so much for each of them.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this forum. We are hosted by the NAACP Atlanta chapter, as well as Citizens for Excellence in Elected Leaders and WCEG TalkRadio.com. We are highlighting this evening those who were courageous enough to offer themselves up to serve as public servants for the 39th District of the Georgia Senate. And we are appreciative that you all have joined us virtually this evening so that you can make an informed decision in this race. And it has been so exciting to see so many people standing in long lines to cast their ballots and ensuring that their voice be heard. So just a few ground rules. So you will have 2 minutes to give us your opening statement or your platform, as well as 2 minutes to answer a question. And if a candidate needs to rebut an issue when his or her name is specifically called, you will have a minute for rebuttal. We will also allow for a 2-minute closing statement. Now we only have an hour, so let's get busy. I like to keep things fresh. So for our opening statements, let's begin in reverse alphabetical order. So Ms. Linda Pritchett, if you will begin.
She got to unmute.
You all for having us evening. My name is Linda Pritchett. Can you hear?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead. Yes, we hear you now.
My name is Linda Pritchett. I am a mother, a wife, a daughter of immigrants, and candidate for state senator of District 39. I am running because
We've lost your audio, Ms. Pritchett, candidate Pritchett.
Okay, well, let's try to move to Miss Joanna Potts while Miss Pritchett attempts to reestablish. Ms. Potts?
Okay, I'll be glad to. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Richard Rose of the NAACP. Thank you, Aungelique, Damita, Chatman, and the Center for Excellence in Elected Leaders. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for your interest in our race. I'm Joanna Potts. I'm a fourth generation native Atlantan. I'd like to ask everybody that's listening to please go to my website, joannapotts.com, and check out my bio and resume. I have about 30 years of business leadership experience in the areas of risk management and construction management, and federal contracting. I like to take the rest of my time to introduce myself to kind of separate myself from my other three opponents in this race. First, we have Mr. Zam Fort, and he is the son of Vincent Fort, who held this seat that we're all running for about 24, 26 years. And I would just like to say to the voters of District 39 that this is not a legacy seat. And I would like to ask them to evaluate us on the principles and the values that we stand for. And I'd like to say that I feel the Fort family had enough time. Mr. Fort has been endorsed by Georgia Socialist Party. And that's just a little bit scary to me. I want the voters to take note of that. With regard to Halpern, our district is the most gerrymandered of all of the 56 Senate districts. Ms. Halpern said she used to live in the South Side. 15 years ago, she decided to move to Buckhead to create a safer environment for her children. We need somebody in this district that's committed to the voters of the district who seem to really care. We've been invited to 6 or 7 forums and not one forum sponsored by anyone north of I-20. Ms. Pritchett, most respectfully, has run for this office 3 or 4 times and hasn't filed disclosures yet. Some of her financial concerns are things that I hope the voters of this district take note of. She is now, and was on the day that we all qualified for, arrested for breaking in.
Excuse me, Ms. Potts. Excuse me, Ms. Potts. I'm going to jump in. Your time is up, but I'm going to jump in and let me set some ground rules. We are not here to bash. This is a professional forum. We're not here to bash. I'm not here. No one's here to dig. We're here for the residents. I'm going to tell you now, and if it happens again, I'm going to have you just. Oh, I'm not going to do that. Thank you so much.
Most respectfully, understood.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Potts. If we can now get Ms. Sonia Halpern.
Good evening. I am so glad to be with everybody tonight at this forum. Thank you for having us and giving us a chance to introduce ourselves. My name is Sonia Halpern. I have lived in this district for 22 years, the entire time I've lived in Georgia, and I have lived on both sides of this district, which gives me a really fresh understanding of the stressors of the different sides of the district, as well as the commonalities, and where there are concerns that cross the sides of the district. In my 22 years here, I have established a very long track record of success. My ethics, my work, and my record of success are what I lean on as I enter into this race to be your next state senator for District 39. I have literally sat at the intersection of business, politics, and community service, and have had leadership roles in all of those areas. I have a reputation, and I've earned the reputation as somebody who is a creative problem solver, somebody who is able to think strategically and act tactically to execute. I have a reputation as somebody who is a coalition builder and who's able to bridge differences in order to get stuff done. I have a lot of experience managing big budgets, and I have experience leading over and over again for some of the most respected not-for-profits in this metro area, along with business concerns and a long record in politics. If you've not heard my name before, it is because I'm the person who is generally working behind the scenes, rolling up her sleeves and getting to work. I am about impact. I have a very simple platform for this race, and it is the thing that has guided me in everything that I've done for 20 years, and that is equity, access, and opportunity.
Thank
And
you.
I
Your time
believe,
is up.
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Angelique, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, thank you, Ms. Halpern. Mr. Ford, please.
Thank you all for having me. Again, my name is Zan Ford, running to be the next state senator for District 39. A little bit about me. I am a progressive Democrat, meaning that I put people and working families first in all that I do. I'm here to advocate for a $15 minimum wage so that every Georgian that's a full-time worker in this state has the ability to provide for their family without having to rely on public assistance. I also want to see Medicaid expansion, so 300,000 state of Georgia residents are able to have insurance. It was bad enough before COVID. In the time of COVID, it's downright unconscionable that Republican leadership refuses to do so. I want to see police reform. I would namely want to see police officers be held accountable so we just don't move bad apples from one jurisdiction to another, but we pull their certification to be peace officers in this state. And I also want to see a comprehensive civil rights reform for this state, one that is inclusive of all groups, including LGBT groups, so that everybody can be protected against discrimination for employment or housing. Those are the things I stand for now and will stand for once I'm elected after November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, also, will I have a chance to respond to Ms. Potts since she did actually mention me by name?
You know, I think you should get a 1-minute rebuttal for that.
Okay. Thank you. It's unfortunate Ms. Potts wants to bring up the Democratic Socialist America endorsement for me. I am proud of that endorsement. And it's really funny that she would say that because she doesn't know her own history specifically for this district. Julian Bond was a member of the Democratic Socialists back in the 70s. And he is also one of my predecessors, our predecessors here in this district. So this district has a history of progressive leadership and has always been supported by those people in the Democratic Socialists of America. So she should be very careful before she speaks on things when she obviously isn't sure of her history. Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ford.
Could we go back to Mrs. Pritchard? And she stopped at 1 minute and 18. So we're gonna let her finish her
Opening statement. Ms. Pritchard, we have you back now. Can you unmute your mic and go ahead and finish your opening statement?
Absolutely. I wonder if I could start over because I don't know at what point I got cut off. I couldn't.
Okay, we're gonna be fair. We're gonna go on and give you your 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Again, good evening. My name is Linda Pritchett. I am a mother, a wife, and a daughter of immigrants, as well as candidate for state senator in District 39. I am running because we have a lot of work to do and we need someone who has actual relevant experience working in government that understands the legislative process. I'm not funded by any special interest groups or beholden to any persons or promises other than the people that I offer myself to serve. We need laws that work for us instead of making life more difficult and benefiting just a few. My grassroots platform is centered around introducing smart legislation to change election laws, support economic stability, and continue criminal justice reform. I have been a strong and vocal advocate for voter rights and safer communities. On November 3rd, you will have the opportunity to choose from the nice things that you hear from others say, or a track record of effective community involvement and commitment for over 10 years. My actions speak louder than my words, and I'd like to ask you to vote for Linda Pritchett. I would also like to ask if I can respond to Ms. Potts to have a rebuttal based on the comments that she made towards me.
Yes, ma'am. We'll give you a 1-minute response to that.
First, thank you, Ms. Potts, for being interested in me as a candidate. Yes, I have run for this seat before. I was on the ballot just in June because I really felt that it was important to run to make sure that we had someone that would actually introduce meaningful legislation. And with regard to my disclosures, you might need to check them again because I've always filed them on time. But thanks for your concern, Ms. Potts.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Pritchett. About a week ago, most of us learned that this race for Georgia's 39th Senate seat was not on that nonpartisan general election ballot. Voters must request the Democratic primary special election ballot, or more ideally, a poll worker should offer the ballot based on the voter's address, if all goes well. I personally talked to several voters in this district who say they did not see this race on their ballot. So my question to you is, who notified you of this development? What is your reaction to it? And what do you think about the way the Secretary of State's office decided to handle the withdrawal of Senator Nikema Williams from this race? So let's begin with Mr. Ford.
Thank you for that question. I found out about this situation by some of my supporters. Once early voting started, I began to get phone call after phone call from my supporters saying or asking what happened, why didn't they see my name? After doing some more research and actually getting to the bottom of it, I was quite frankly incensed. This situation is handled horribly by the Secretary of State, and it's indicative of a pattern the Secretary of State has had from when Brian Kemp was in office there to right now with Raffensperger, of how they seem to intentionally do things to disenfranchise voters in this state. And it is unacceptable. And I hopefully once elected, I'll be able to do something about that and enact some legislation that will kind of remedy that issue. Because it's one thing they just can't seem to get it right year after year, election after election.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Halpern.
So my campaign, as soon as the race was set for November 3rd, actually was in contact with both.
Is anyone hearing her?
No.
Look like you froze.
Okay, so let's move on to Ms. Potts and allow Ms. Halpern to reestablish herself. Ms. Potts?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for the question. I was informed, I realized that we are running in a Democratic primary. We're not running in the general election. And I feel as though I was informed that at the time that I signed up for the election on September the 4th. I feel that the Democratic Party is being more than fair with us. We have got a record number of days in any local election going across the country for people to be able to vote for us. I think one of the things that are being confused, when you think about people running for special elections, they usually have a date that's typically not attached to the general election. And it's incumbent upon the candidate to drive you to that date. Those are the dates that you hear, like March 1st and September 29th. We have the great benefit of everybody going to the polls already. And in an unprecedented fashion, we still have 16 days to drive people to the polls. Sometimes you see on folks' campaign literature and signs, they'll have the date that you need to go up there. Nobody is stopping us from being able to do that. It's on us to inform our voters to ask for the special ballot. If anybody goes and they didn't get it, they're able to go back. Right now, we're in the early voting period. It's general voting. On the precinct day on November the 3rd, if you go to your precinct and you're in 39, you'll have it. And it's on the absentee ballots. I certainly don't think it's voter suppression. I think they're being more than fair with us. We got to work for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're muted. You're
Okay.
muted.
I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Okay, I think it certainly is voter, it's voter disenfranchisement. And the reason why is because the average voter is not as sophisticated as us candidates or people in the political arena. And I believe that although it is a special primary election, people should have known that. Everyone doesn't read that. Everyone doesn't anticipate that ahead of time. And to be honest, as many elections as I participated in, I've never seen something like this. I've never seen something where even the chair of the Democratic committee for Fulton County was not even made aware that she would have to ask for this race to be placed on the ballot. For someone to have to ask for something that they would just feel that should automatically be on the ballot is just playing games. If it's on the absentee ballot and people did not have to specifically request it on their application, it should be the same on the when you walk in to vote. So this is indicative of voter disenfranchisement, not just based on the law, based on the fact that it was not communicated to people. When precincts change, you have to communicate it to people. And when you have to ask for a specific race to be on the ballot, that's disenfranchisement. That is just simply not fair. And for all of the people that wanted to vote for us and did not have that opportunity, and they cannot return to those precincts and vote again, that is wrong. And this is going to turn out to be a fiasco that's going to play out in courts, and it's the wrong use of all of our time and all of our money. Elections should not be this difficult. It should be easier for people to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchett. All right, Ms. Halpern, can you unmute and give us your response? You have 2 minutes on this question.
Thank you. So I think I froze, sorry about that, right as I was saying that my campaign did know weeks and weeks and weeks ago, because we had been in contact with the Secretary of State's office and the Democratic Party of Georgia to understand how it would be on the ballot. And so in literally all of my materials that have gone out, whether it be mailers, whether it's my television ads, whether it's social media, whether it's phone calls, whether it's door knocks, we have been telling people that they should request it. Now, of course, the poll workers should ask, but I have been saying all along to request it. The interesting thing about this race is that it is technically a Democratic primary special election. And that is the distinction for why every single person in the 39th district, Republicans included, are not just being automatically given it on the ballot. That's the distinction as I understand it. And as the Democratic Party of Georgia, also kind of co-signed on. And from what I understand from personally visiting 12 polling sites myself last Monday and Tuesday as early voting began, there is now really uniformity. And I will say that Fulton County did quickly make sure that there was uniformity from what I can tell in terms of how the poll workers are supposed to be dealing with this particular race. And so it does add a extra layer of complexity, certainly as it relates to messaging to people. And so, it has in fact been incumbent upon us as candidates. Of course, like I said, it's been on everything I've done for a month. And so, kind of dealing with the cards that were dealt with. But the idea is not that every Republican in the district actually gets to.
Time up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Mr. Rhodes, were you going to ask a question? He's on mute, so I'll move on. Many people in the United States were really touched in a profound way after seeing a police officer with his foot on the neck of George Floyd until really he stopped breathing. And so that inhumane death was actually captured on videotape, and it's led to hundreds of protests across the country. I know I've covered several of them here in Atlanta. The question is, what kind of legislation would you initiate to take the people's disenfranchisement with law enforcement and turn it into a proactive stance against police brutality in the state Senate? And let's begin with Mr. Ford.
You're on mute. You're muted, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So for me, the issue of racial profiling and whatnot is not something that I have to imagine about. It's something that's happened to me as a younger Black male in this city and in this country. I've experienced it firsthand, being handcuffed and set on the side of the road just simply because I fit a description. With that said, what I want to do to restore this trust that we should have in our police officers is to enact a statewide database that tracks the negative interactions that our police have with our neighborhood. Again, we want to make sure that bad apples don't simply move from one jurisdiction to another. We need to be able to revoke the certification that these people have, so they're no longer able to operate as law enforcement officers in this state. I think simply that's the first step, but I believe taking that step to remove these bad cops from our roles, police roles, completely will go a long way to begin the process of building respect between communities and the police that are supposed to serve them. I do believe police should have a high deal of respect, but if they want that respect, there's a high deal of responsibility and standards that we have to hold them to whenever they come into our neighborhoods. So that's how I would address that first and foremost.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Potts, if you could respond, please.
Okay, thank you so much. I know all of us are from Atlanta, so I'm just going to assume that we probably all remember, because it was quite a news story about a year ago, or maybe less, when Chief Erica Shields made the news by stopping all chases of police cars in the city. And I think that her rationale at the time, which I very much agreed with, was she said that it wasn't worth anybody dying in order for her to apprehend a suspect over some property to make an arrest. I think that logic is apropos and it's brilliant, and it should apply to any arrest in the state of Georgia and in the nation. I don't think that it has to do with black and white. I think that good policy is policy that makes sense and doesn't have a lot of interpretation in it. I want to stand for policy. I'm willing to get behind anything that says that murdering is not a part of policing. Nobody gets to kill anybody on their job. There is only one executioner in the state, and it should not be a police officer with a high school diploma and a certificate from the police academy. Never, ever should murder be a part of arresting. And if any of the rest of us murder someone on our job, we're going to face murder charges. Police should as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Pritchard, let's hear from you.
So the first thing is that we already have laws on the books that address this, and there are also standard operating procedures for police agencies. What happened in that situation, the officers were rogue officers. They were going against their own department's policies. And another thing that I would propose in the state of Georgia to deal with law enforcement, making sure that they have enough training, sensitivity training. I'm not sure if you all are aware that when officers go to their mandate class, which is their academy, they receive 408 hours of instruction, but cosmetologists receive 1,200 hours of mandated instruction. So hairdressers have to get more training than police officers that we place on the street. That is a problem. But another part of it also is we currently have a referendum item on our ballot that talks about sovereign immunity. Families of people that have gone through police brutality and have issues like this should be able to sue these departments and sue these officers personally. So if you vote yes for that sovereign immunity, that will help you out. But we need to make sure that we have accountability from our police chiefs that are appointed by either our city councils or by our county officials. So we need more accountability. We need correct enforcement of our laws. And we need the people on these juries to start convicting officers that do wrong, because it hurts the officers that are working so hard out there, risking their lives to do right and to protect and serve us.
I agree with that.
Thank you so much. Ms. Halpern.
Yes, well, I'm a mom and I've got 3 kids. You can probably hear them in the background, so sorry. But 2 of them are teenage boys, and one of them now is at the age that he's driving. And so, I mean, I will tell you as a mom, I've had my oldest son be stopped walking just up the street with a soccer bag and soccer ball in his hand, asking him where he's going. So these are the kinds of fears that I take with me every single day, as most Black moms do, and Black dads too, frankly. I think that there are changes that need to be made, and there are things like, banning chokeholds that we can really strive for. There definitely needs to be the lack of ability for somebody to move from one jurisdiction to another after doing bad. But I also want to highlight the other side of this, right? Which is around reforming criminal justice. We have a very broken probation system as well, which traps Georgians in the criminal justice system for like twice as long as the national average. So once you're criminalized, you stay criminalized, which impacts your job, opportunities, and everything else. So it's a system, and we've got to work on both parts of this system to get things right and to get things better.
All right, thank you so much. And Mr. Rose has a question now. Mr. Rose, if you could go ahead and pose the next question.
Sure, this is an easy question. It's a two-part question. Are you a member of the NAACP? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Who's first?
All right, let's begin with Ms. Halpern.
I'm a proud card-carrying member of the NAACP. Okay, and why? Here's the thing. I think that so many of these organizations might feel like they are like of our parents' generation, right? Or the generation before us, but they are just as relevant and just as important today. Many of the issues that these organizations have been striving to help close the gap on still exist today. And if anything, we should be realizing how much, deeply entrenched these issues are. So the work of organizations like the NAACP really are around expanding opportunity, something I believe in deeply, making sure that things are equitable, something I believe in deeply, making sure that we have access to resources and investments so that we can do the things we need to do, which is something I believe in deeply. So your values are my values. And so I'm happy to be part of this organization that has been in the trenches and on the front lines for decades and decades and decades.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Ford, if you could give us a response, please.
All right, thank you for that question. I'm unmuted now. I am not currently a member of the NAACP. I would entertain becoming a member. In the past few years, it's always been something that has been on my mind, especially being around some of the work that I've been present for with my father, so as far as his advocacy over the years, working with him and whatnot. And it's just something I've never pulled the trigger on simply because of building a career for myself in the insurance industry. But now that Richard Rose has been so kind to ask that question and pose it, I will definitely go ahead and reevaluate that situation ASAP.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Pritchett.
I am currently not a paid member. I have been a member of the Clayton chapter and also of the Fayette chapter. However, I have participated over the last 10 years in many of the activities that the NAACP has had, a lot of the forums, a lot of the town hall meetings, when they have called me and asked me for assistance in critical matters and issues. And I've even traveled with the NAACP and some of the state legislators to help rally and bring awareness to a lot of issues of injustice in the state of Georgia and in other states. But I will join.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Potts.
All right. Mr. Rose, thank you for that question. No, I am not a member of the NAACP, and I'm gonna tell you why. And I had a meeting with Mr. James Woodall, the Georgia State president, about a week ago, and he wanted to know why. And I think that the NAACP is certainly a gem and a historical gold mine. I would be willing to join forces in helping bring it more further forward to the front profile, so that our generation, even my own self, age 49 and under, see it as, a viable organization. I think that we might look at it like an old Negro spiritual, and we know where the parties are, but we don't know where the NAACP meetings are. So if you tell me where the NAACP meeting is and you make sure that I know, I'll be by there with a check. I promise you that.
Okay, Mr. Rose, I think that was an excellent question, and you have 3 prospective members based on my count. All right, so the pandemic has affected us all. That's one of the reasons that we're all in our own homes on Zoom. And so this next question surrounds that. It's affected us in so many ways, but unemployment particularly, not only in the US, but here in Georgia has plummeted because of it. What is your economic plan for bringing jobs back to our state and the 39th District of Georgia? Let's begin with Ms. Pritchett.
Well, the first thing that I'd like to see happen is there were a lot of people that filed for unemployment in the state of Georgia, and their applications were not taken, and they did not receive their benefits. There were protests down in Clayton County's Department of Labor. And I think that, the legislators called for the resignation of the gentleman that's over the Department of Labor. I think it's egregious that individuals that hold those offices just decide on their own to not appropriate funds that people pay into. So in order to bring jobs back, a lot of people did not receive a lot of those loans that came about from the Small Business Administration. A lot of the big corporations got it, but a lot of the smaller business didn't. And those smaller businesses wound up going out of business. So I would look into looking into the government grants that we have available for small businesses, for individuals that have fallen in between, whether you're 1099 or a W-2 employee. We in Fulton County have lost millions of dollars because we have not properly appropriated grant monies. So I would look at properly appropriating grant money that's available. It's a lot of money out there, but we have to make sure that there is a mechanism for people to be able to receive it. And so we have to work on enforcement. We have a lot of enforcement issues in Georgia where people in positions of authority do what they want to do, disregard the law, and they need to be held accountable. And our lawmakers actually have to speak up. And these are issues that need to be taken up during the session, not after the fact.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go now to Ms. Halpern.
Yeah, so I look at this and I think about a number of different approaches to take. So there's jobs itself. And actually, Ms. Pritchett is right. You know, we have really one of the worst unemployment insurance programs in the country. And so that's not getting jobs back, but that is certainly helping families in that in-between time. There are all kinds of infrastructure projects that need to be done. Those are jobs. Getting people trained and able to do those and making sure that those resources are flowing down so that people can work is another way to approach it. I'm also looking and thinking a lot about vocational, these are trainings, but investments in these things that will get people in an ability to either pivot from one thing they were doing to move on to something else where they can support themselves and their families. We know that there's a trend where trades we're going to have a lack of people who are able to do trades. And so making sure that we're investing in vocational and technical training and trade programs so that there will be people who can take those jobs as people are retiring and getting older and moving out of them. And I, believe deeply in entrepreneurship. And so investments in that kind of thing too, so that people can get themselves on a path also to economic freedom. And so those are a few different lenses by which I think about that question that you just asked.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Potts.
Thank you. With regard to getting our jobs back in the state, I almost can't even really get to the jobs portion because it feels like moving new furniture into a dirty room. I feel like, clearly everybody can see what happened when the bottom kind of fell out of our economy, when COVID changed everything. We still don't know where we are with regard to that. And we don't, from a national level, a statewide level, or maybe even any city levels, have a clear plan for how to end the pandemic. And until we see really how that stops and what the fallout really is, I think we're just cutting down jungles and we don't know what forest we're in. to even begin to talk about job creation. I do appreciate what Ms. Pritchett is talking about, because I think we need some lifelines for people until that time comes. But right now I feel like we're treading water, and it's kind of premature about figuring out what sectors and where the jobs will lie. I wish I had a better answer, but we're in uncertain times.
Okay, we appreciate your transparency. Mr. Ford.
All right, thank you for the question. COVID-19 has affected me personally. Just 2 days ago, I received the unfortunate news that a good friend of mine for over 20 plus years passed due to complications related to COVID. So this one hits home pretty hard. As far as what people are doing right now and how they're living right now, I really think we need to extend the benefits that we currently have for our people out here struggling with this coronavirus related layoffs and whatnot. Specifically, we need to extend a moratorium on evictions. That is a coming tsunami that we just really aren't really prepared for. Once the moratorium ends, there'll be a tsunami of evictions that we have to deal with. I want to see the Department of Labor fully staffed so that there's prompt handling of unemployment claims and full distribution of PPE to everybody who needs it, all people in this state that are in need. As far as the people back to work, once we are able to get some of these projects going, I do agree that job training is going to be key. And with my relationship with organized labor, I really think that we can get union leaders to do the training. They do it better than anybody else. They know more about it. And I think those are the people that we need to get to do that. And I also want to see major projects. Any major project that happens from this point forward needs to have a minority participation program, because Black folks, or minorities in particular, are the hardest hit by COVID-19. So if we have things in place to increase their participation, the minority communities can benefit from it once we're back on our feet.
So on the heels of that, let's just deal straight on with what Ms. Potts raised. What is the way to end the pandemic, or what can you do as a senator of the 39th district? What can you do under the Gold Dome dealing with the governor, the Republican governor, and the lack of a national plan nationwide? So what can be addressed? Ms. Potts, any answers from anybody? Let's start with you.
I wish I had one, but I guess I'm in good company, from Trump on down to Dr. Fauci on down, Sanjay Gupta, Kemp, and Keisha. Nobody seems to know. It's very uncertain. I tell you, it just feels scary. Every day when you get up, you just don't know what to believe. I'm unqualified to speak on that. I think that when we get to issues that are over my head, when I'm a senator, I will always, seek out expert advice. And that's all that I can say. But I do know that I don't think anybody has really seen the expert. And this is one of these things where I know we maybe need to separate church and state, but we got to turn it over. And I stay in prayer that the answer is coming. And, when I see a solution that makes sense, I think we need transparency, first of all, so that everybody agrees and understands what COVID is and what it isn't, and how it affects you. And I know that I'm interested in being a part of this legislature, because whatever we have to do, it's not a short-term plan. Even if we had a vaccine today, it's going to take, they said it would take 3 years for the vaccine to get to everyone. So we're in a very uncertain time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Halpern?
Well, I think that there's a few things that we do know for sure. COVID has impacted everybody in lots of different kinds of ways. And I think that we know that it has disrupted so many different sectors, from business and industry to education to healthcare, just to name a few. And so ultimately, and then we've got to remember too, that the revenues of the state have also decreased, right? This is also a state that's been impacted by COVID. And so when we talk about being legislators, and we talk about creating new policy, and we talk about budget, there is going to have to be a very, concerted effort to look at the budget and make smart and compassionate decisions that may be multi-year in nature, in order to figure out what we need to do and how we're going to get there. And the reality is the revenue isn't what it was. So it's as much as Me and anybody else here might want to say we need to invest more in our schools. The money may not actually be there. So the question really is, what can we do well with what we have? And how can we prioritize and be smart and compassionate at the same time about what needs to happen? Because COVID has impacted every single sector across the board, and everybody's got their own story. I'm sorry, Mr. Ford, about your friend. That's terrible. Everybody has a different way in which COVID has completely upended their own personal lives. And so the state is going to have to just look across the board to figure out the places that we need to prioritize and how we can do that and how we can maybe use those dollars more effectively and efficiently.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pritchett.
So I think that we do know a few things. We know that we have to wear, have face protective gear, wash our hands, all those things. But what I think that our state legislature should have had a special session to discuss this was that they needed to get together with OSHA. They need to come up with some safety standards for the restaurant industry. I believe that in the schools, teachers should have all been tested. They should be tested repeatedly before they went back into those facilities. I think that there's a lot more that we can do in terms of public health. And I think that the reason that those things weren't done is based on the governor that we have that was just trying to open the state back up so that everybody can go back to work. And then you could start, generating revenues and sales tax and things like that. But there were a lot of people, especially in North Georgia, like in Gainesville and the chicken factories, they were forced to go to work. And if they didn't go to work, they would lose their jobs. And that was not. And we have to work on changing those laws. We have to look at making public health and public safety a priority. And I don't think we have, because Georgia is a state that just focuses on profits. And we have to come away from this. We have lost over 220,000 people in this country to COVID. My own uncle in New York, who was a fire marshal, had COVID, and I'm his only next of kin. And I was, coordinating his care from New York. I was here and he was in New York. So basically all I'm trying to say is COVID has hit all of us, but I don't think that the state legislature handled the situation correctly, because they did not take the measures to make sure that people were safe, especially people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pritchett. Mr. Ford.
All right, yes. There's a lot that we can do for it. We've seen other countries handle this pandemic with much more grace and much more common sense. What we have is a lack of good sense in the leadership positions in this country and in this state. It starts with Donald Trump's first thing we got to do is get him out of there. I think we all understand that. But also we have to impress upon Governor Kemp how absolutely foolish it is for him to follow hand and foot right behind Donald Trump. A statewide mask mandate, a robust testing program. These are things that we know work. We've seen it work other places. The only reason it's not working here is because we're not doing it at all. So there's a lot that our government can do to actually stem this tide, to end this pandemic as it is. And we're just refusing to do it because we're politicizing it. The leadership is politicizing this pandemic rather than using it as an opportunity to actually examine our infrastructure as far as, testing and so on and so forth, our pandemic response, and increasing our ability to actually help people. And in the state of Georgia, like Ms. Pritchett said, we prioritize corporations over people, and that needs to be reversed. People over corporations. If our people are healthy, happy, and safe, our state is going to be prosperous. And that's just the bottom line. We just have to, raise holy hell. I hate to be, excuse my French, but we honestly have to do that, because if we're going to have a governor, a state leadership, with Kemp at the helm, there's no appealing to him. There's no appealing to his morality. We actually have to be disruptive to him enough that he's willing to actually change and break away from this failed policy that Trump has spearheaded as a nation's leader.
All right, Mr. Ford, thank you. Next question. The NAACP has been focused on bringing down vestiges of Jim Crow that are supported by state governments, such as Stone Mountain and Confederate monuments. What initiatives are you prepared to put forth to join in this endeavor? Let's begin with Ms. Potts.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a very good question. Initiatives that I would be willing to put forth to get rid of Confederate. Probably a little bit different than most people, particularly on the Black hand side with regard to the Confederate monuments. I think that we could get into a little bit of a danger zone when we start just erasing all of the history at a certain point. I am not in favor of them being in prominent places. I am in favor of any measure to rename streets and landmarks, but Stone Mountain, I mean, I think that a place like Stone Mountain needs a disclaimer in front of it, but it's a real thing. And, you know, we just can't erase. The Jews don't want to ever stop talking about Nazi Germany. They want to bring it up every time so that you remember what happened and you know the place and you know what they've been through. So I'm just not a fan of just tearing down all Confederate monuments.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pritchett.
In Germany, there is not one monument to Adolf Hitler. Okay, so Georgia has a law that prohibits the taking down of these monuments. I was in a protest in Fayetteville where the Sons of the Confederacy wanted to have some event and it dealt with monuments. We have to. It's not about erasing the past. It's just something. It's the ugliest part of our history, and we have to be responsible and we have to move forward. And so I would like to repeal those laws and at least have us consider moving those monuments to other places. It may be historical for other people, but it's not cool. It's not cool at all. And so I would be in favor of removing monuments. Stone Mountain was a place that Black people were thrown off the tops of Stone Mountain. That is egregious. That is crazy. And just to continue to glorify that, it's crazy. I just can't. We'll have to repeal those laws. At some point, we'll get there. But we have to change people's mindset and really put into focus what we're really talking about. It's just like having a tree that someone was lynched at and just deciding we're not going to chop that tree down. I will burn that tree down if it reminded me of someone that was lynched on it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pritchett. Ms. Halpern.
So I think a couple of different things. One, I think part of the reason why these monuments are glorified is because in general, we, the collective we, not just Black community, but the collective we don't know history. Americans do not know American history. And so where my community, our community takes it very personally, and we should, other communities don't because they don't understand the history. I don't believe that we should have Confederate monuments all over and not have monuments to the wonderful accomplishments and achievements of other people, including Black Americans, including Native Americans, including name the list, and we don't have those. So I am actually in favor of removing monuments, putting them in places where they can be put in context so that people understand what happened, why, what was wrong, and how these things came to be. Otherwise, we will continue to repeat the same history. And I would point to the cyclorama as an example at the Atlanta History Center, where they actually have done a very good job taking that painting and contextualizing it so you walk out of there understanding the history. But glorifying Confederate statues, no. Do we need to have one in front of the Capitol? No, we don't. And so, I think that there's a way to educate ourselves and use the conversation and the discussion around the removal of some or the moving of others in order to be able to have that conversation so that everybody can actually understand the context in which they actually came to exist and why they were created in the first place and when.
Time up. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ford.
I'm completely and utterly in favor of getting rid of every last one of these Confederate monuments. Most of these monuments that we see around were put up at two points in our history. Once in the early 1900s when people were enacting the Jim Crow laws, and again in the 1950s and 60s when Black people were in the midst of the civil rights movement. And just that timeline right there lets you know that these monuments didn't go up to glorify the Southern heritage, but they went up as a way to intimidate and just intimidate Black folks who were, beginning to get more rights or demand more rights, right? So whether or not they should be around, it's a no-brainer for me. We should burn every last one down, melt them down, throw them in the Chattahoochee or wherever, Lake Lanier, and good riddance. There's no way that in this country we need to glorify people who are turncoats, traitors, so on and so forth. The people that represent the absolute worst this country has ever had to offer. There's no way that we should glorify that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. That's pretty much where I stand on that. There's no equivocation or compromise in my heart on that one there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Following the 2020 census, Georgia will conduct a redistricting process to determine new political districts. State legislatures or independent commissions will begin redrawing lines of electoral districts for local, state, and congressional seats. Now, this process, as we all know, is called redistricting, and it's based on the population count provided by the census. Advocates for redistricting reform have urged lawmakers to give control of the highest political process to an independent commission to prevent gerrymandering. Do you support the current process or do you favor reform? Let's begin with Ms. Halpern.
I favor reform. I actually do believe in having independent organization to do that work so that political people are not, trying to make sure that they're creating their own constituencies and keeping their own seats. So I would absolutely favor an independent group that that does that work and looks at it and tries to make it fair. I'm concerned about, what it's going to look like, because if it, based on the census, as we know, the concern with the census is that, Black and brown communities get undercounted and white communities get overcounted, and what that means in general for our communities in terms of the way that dollars flow down into the communities and the investments that will be made. So that's, as it is, a concern around the census and us not necessarily being willing to be as much in the count, and add to that then redistricting. And I think that's just a terrible recipe for disaster. So I'm in favor of an independent commission.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ford.
I am also in favor of reform. Anything that we can do to stop the conservatives under the Gold Dome from doing their very best to disenfranchise Georgia voters is a good thing, particularly those people who need someone to stand up for them the most. And I intend to do so once I'm elected. Over the years, watching what they've done to this state is absolutely heartbreaking. And I will do everything in my power to resist that movement. Now, and just to sum it up, I am in favor of an independent commission that will handle that, that'll take that out of the hands of biased lawmakers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Potts.
I'm not in favor of having a private organization do the job of lawmakers. I think that individuals are voting for us to go there and to speak with them and stay connected to them from their neighborhoods and do the best job that we can. We didn't get into this situation privately. The District 39 is the most gerrymandered district of the Senate and all. And that's not Republicans doing that to us. That's Democrats all around us touching in all sides. And for the last couple of apportionment sessions, we have just let some of our Democratic senators eat our lunch and take out all of our historic landmarks. Of course, you know, theoretically, a district should be a square, and ours is ridiculous. But I certainly think that that's something that lawmakers are elected to handle and should handle. I think that's going along the lines of privatizing schools and prisons. That's what lawmakers are for.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Pritchett.
10 years ago, I was part of the redistricting process. I spoke around the state of Georgia as a citizen, you know, basically speaking on behalf of the district that I lived in at that time, which was Senate District 35 under Senator Donzella James. And all the areas that I had mentioned we wanted to keep, they heard what I said and they took that area out. And then I became part of Senate District 39. What I believe would be a fair process would be a commission that has half Democrats, half Republicans. It would force, it would be equal. It would force people to have to work together. We have that on our election boards where you have half of the people appointed are Republican and half are Democrat. If that doesn't work, I'm not opposed to an independent, you know, review, but I do believe that at some point we have to come to a point where, partisanship aside, we have to do what's best for people, and we play way too many games, you know, with people's lives, their livelihoods, and we have to just be responsible for our people. Some districts have like one street in another district, and it's all to be able to create these delegations. And then if the delegation has more Republican members, then they can pass local legislation or not. We have to get away from all that slickness. All that is just slick behind the scenes stuff that most people don't realize. I just think if you split it down the middle, somebody will figure it out one way or another.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Pritchett. Mr. Rose, you have the next question. Go right ahead.
Sure, thank you. So there's a lot of discussion about reparations. In fact, it's been probably about 26 years since the NAACP introduced a national resolution on reparations. Understanding that the root word of reparations is repair. What is your perspective on reparations?
I'll be glad to take it. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Potts. You may begin.
I absolutely agree with reparations. I hope that that's something that we get to very soon. I think the time is now. I think that we can take advantage of the climate in the country where a lot of people have racial equity on their mind, and the time is now to do something about it. Just independently as a hobby, for the last 3 years, I have sat on a private committee with about 30 or 40 lawyers from around the country. And what we're excited about, we don't know if it's by osmosis or leaking, is that a lot of the things that we've been talking about are coming out in some of these plans that we see entertainers talking about. We have studied the number. I know exactly how much everybody should be getting. I think that it's fair and it should happen very soon. I absolutely 100% speak for reparations for descendants of slaves at all times. 100% my vote is yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ford.
I also am in favor of reparations. We've done it for other groups that this country has done wrong over its long and varied history, and I don't see any reason why the American descendants of African descendants of slaves should be disregarded in this fact. I do believe, though, that any request for reparations needs to come from the community as a consensus ask, rather than allowing the government to bring a plan to us and we just say yay or nay. We definitely need to be front and center dictating that discussion rather than being reactive to it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Halpern?
I do not believe in reparations as a lump sum payment to individuals. What I would like to see is investments in our communities that will have impact, that will serve generations. Because the question around reparations, to me, the root of this issue is around the generational impact and lack that our communities have had for hundreds of years. And I don't think that gets shifted or changed if each of us as individuals get a lump sum payment that's not actually going to end up being enough to literally change lives and change our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives, and our grandchildren's lives, and on and on and on. I would like to see investments that go deep into our communities, allow us to be able to do things like business, right? And entrepreneurship. I would like the investments to have a much more longitudinal impact than just kind of the today impact for each of us as individuals. So I'm in favor of investments. And I think that very specific, mirror needs to be, and a focus needs to be on our communities and all of the different areas in which we are behind because of slavery and what it has meant for us as a community, and then find investments that are specifically for us to impact us and our children and our children and our children. I would love to see it happen that way. I believe in long-term impact, and I want to see generations succeed, not just, each of us as individuals. This is community. How do we impact our community?
Okay, thank you so much. And
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay. So, surprisingly, in World War II, the Japanese were given reparations because they were placed in internment camps. So if the Japanese can receive reparations, I do believe that as people of color, that we should receive reparations as well. This is about the mistreatment of Black people, bringing people here without their consent, making them slaves, raping them, killing them, using them as free labor. So I don't believe that it's necessarily about the amount of money you receive. I think that what people of color are looking for is an acknowledgement that what you did to us was wrong. And I think that that's what every Black person in their heart would like to get, that grand apology and acknowledgement that slavery was wrong, so that we can move forward and people will know that you should not mistreat people of color. You should not treat people of color differently. You should not redline their communities. You should not withhold the best form of education. You should not profile them. So I think as an acknowledgement, even if everyone received $1, but it was $1 of acknowledgement, that would go a long way.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question. The state of Georgia's HBCUs have been underfunded and come under attack through the threat of consolidation. What initiatives are you willing to put in place to protect, strengthen, and expand Georgia's HBCUs? Let's begin with Ms. Halpern.
So let's think. This is an excellent question, and I do think our HBCUs need additional support. I don't know that I have specific initiatives, but here are a few things that I have been thinking about. I have been thinking about the Hope Scholarship as an example, and how if we expand it and restore it to kind of its original promise, that might be a way. Maybe there are specific investments that we can make in our HBCUs. Certainly we've got our public HBCUs that are part of, that kind of hope where dollars can go. Then we've got our big private HBCUs too that aren't part of that. And I don't know, I don't I'm not sure. What I do know for sure is that our HBCU graduates are successful, and there is a big economic impact on the state of Georgia for our graduates from HBCUs. And I think more recognition of that from the state is a first step. And then from there, we can figure out how do we make sure that those schools are able to be deeply supported and well supported so that they continue to do the brilliant work that they're doing, teaching and educating our young people who then become part of the workforce and do extremely well and help make money for this state.
Thank you. Mr. Ford.
I am against consolidation of HBCUs, against the legislation that was proposed last session. I believe it was by Lester Jackson. I think it's a bad idea and do everything I can to oppose it. The individual heritage of each of those institutions is integral to the college experience in Georgia. It adds richness to the college.
Okay.
For South Scholarship was meant to be a way for kids from from all different types of places all over the state, but specifically those that have a little bit less to have an opportunity to have college. And now it's been reduced to something that it's simply given to people with a certain test score, SAT score, and it just goes flatly against what the intention of the Hope Scholarship was, and it doesn't offer very much hope at all for those who need it the most. So yeah, those two things. I want to restore the Hope Scholarship and impose any and every measure proposed to consolidate HBCUs. That's what I would do to kind of keep the heritage and the culture of those schools intact.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pritchett.
One thing that I would not do is I would make sure that these schools were not taken over by the state. The legislation that was proposed that wanted to throw those schools in, I think that's bad legislation. Also, make sure that we protect our our land grant schools, because those schools, that's really the purpose, that was the purpose of the previous legislation, to be able to take the land grant school, which is Fort Valley, and close down the other two, which was Albany State and Savannah State. I would also encourage outside entities to participate in endowment programs for alumni to come together and invest in endowments. So that way, the school will have funding. Also, to encourage the state to seed an endowment program to jumpstart that. And also for our state to invest in helping to improve the online program capabilities for our HBCU schools. And also, I think that we need to have investments in the sports program. Imagine if Morris Brown had a sports program and the stadium was redone and it was something like Georgia Tech. The amount of revenues that those type of games and that type of, that type of activity would bring, it would pay for a lot of the shortfalls that these schools have. We have seriously neglected Morris Brown. And I think that we personally, the alumni of these schools, need to invest in their alma maters.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pritchett. Ms. Potts.
Well, I was, it tickled me a little bit there. Maybe that was before Miss Pritchett got to town, but they did invest in Morris Brown greatly and redid the stadium, and they have done a great deal for their program. That, I believe that was during the Olympics time. So they really have had, a great deal of state support at, a certain time. I feel like just basically the Hope Scholarship, whatever the state of Georgia is willing to do for any of our best scholars in their pursuit of their secondary and higher education, I think that should go wherever that student wants to go. inside of the state of Georgia. And I think that that should include our Georgia HBCUs. But the first thing that we need to do in District 39 so that we can really advocate for our HBCUs is to get them back in our district. They belong inside of our neighborhood. I have a north side compromise with the north side of the district. I've been spending a lot of time with them. We might be able to get with our senator to the east and make a trade in this apportionment session in 2021 to get those AU Center schools back inside of our district so that we can really have our hands on and do what's best for them.
Okay, thank you. And I believe this will be our last question of the evening.
Proctor,
Yes.
Proctor, Ms. Potts called me out in her.
Okay, so you'll have a 1-minute rebuttal.
I didn't call her out, but okay. I didn't say anything about Ms. Pritchett.
I heard
Well,
my name.
Say that maybe she hadn't come to town.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, well, everybody else heard it. So basically, yeah, before I came to town, they may have.
Sorry, I apologize. I did say that. I apologize. I'm sorry.
No problem. So yeah, before I came to town, the state did invest in Morris Brown. And I think that the state should invest more in Morris Brown. Morris Brown has so many alumni. It has so much potential. And we should really support Morris Brown. Morris Brown could have an online program. Morris Brown, even with the stadium alone, Morris Brown just sits at the heart of these schools. And I think that Morris Brown has actually been neglected. I think that Morris Brown seriously needs more support. That's just my opinion, now that I'm in town.
Okay, our last question for the evening. An Atlanta City Councilman is currently sponsoring a referendum to remove Georgia's private citizens arrest law from the books. And of course, we all looked on in horror as this law was attempted to be carried out by a father and son who shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery. He was an African-American jogger. Private citizens indicated they pursued him because they thought he was suspicious. What is your stand on this law? Let's begin with Ms. Halpern.
Yeah, I don't like it because I do believe that when so many Black and brown bodies are already targeted, we end up being targeted even further. And it gives justification and cover for that kind of activity.
What was the question?
I
I remember.
It was private. It was, what do you think
Citizen
about
arrest laws.
citizen arrest?
Michael Julian Bond just put a referendum on the city floor to have the state repeal these laws. And as a senator from the 39th, you would deal directly with it. Okay, Ms. Halpern, were you finished?
I was, yeah. I think that those are the kinds of laws that should be repealed that are on the books currently that are used as cover.
Okay, Ms. Potts?
Yes, I'm proud of Councilman Michael Bond and all of the Atlanta City Council people for strongly passing that resolution to ask the state legislature to take a look at that. I think that he summed it up exactly right. It's 100 years old. It's like a wild, wild west law. No one needs to hold anyone. Anytime you dial 911, whoever needs to respond to you can be there within minutes. And it's just over and beyond what any citizen needs to do. This is not the wild, wild west. I feel it's an antiquated law and it needs to be off the books. Citizens arrests, yes, let's repeal it. I think that's HB 1203. That needs to be passed through.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ford?
Like my fellow opponents, I also believe that the citizens arrest law in the state of Georgia needs to be repealed. It's antiquated and outdated, and it only offers more opportunity for something bad to go down. And let's just go ahead and repeal it. It's just that simple. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Pritchett?
I also agree that it should be repealed. Fulton County actually happens to be a county that has over 15 cities. We have more jurisdictions than I think anywhere else in the country. We have county, city, MARTA, the schools. We have police everywhere. So I don't think that citizens should be attempting to arrest anyone. I think it's also dangerous in this climate right now with these racial tensions that we have, because there are a lot of people that carry firearms, and it can be something that can turn into the wrong thing. So I think that we should leave the arresting to law enforcement. So I would agree that we should repeal that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And we want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. It is now time for our closing remarks. Let's begin with Ms. Halpern. You have 2 minutes to explain to the voters why they need to select you.
Well, I am excited to be a candidate for State Senate for District 39. What you will find in me is somebody who has experience. I have experience as a creative problem solver, which ESPN saw when they moved me as their only ad salesperson to their internet group when they were first building an internet business. They knew that I would approach it creatively and be able to not just think traditionally, but be a creative problem solver. I did something similar at Cox Newspapers in building coalitions. 500 salespeople needed training. They tapped me to train those salespeople across their 4 largest newspapers because they knew that I could get everybody moving in the same direction and get everybody on track. When I chaired the board for the National Black Arts Festival and that organization was in a lot of trouble, lots of leadership turnover, $500,000 in debt, no programmatic focus. I became the acting executive director and immediately, got to business as a volunteer every day as if it were a paying job and reduced the debt by 90% in the first year, and coalesce the board around a new strategic vision for the organization. And am widely credited with saving that institution, which is the oldest one of its kind in the country. President Obama tapped me to chair the President's Advisory Committee on the Arts because what he understood is that I am a strategic thinker. And I also have the expertise to know how to tactically go about working on and achieving that strategic vision and mission. If a vote for Sonia Halpern is a vote for strong leadership, experienced leadership, guided by common sense, smart decision-making, and experience.
Thank you.
Time up, is that what you just said?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Halpern. Let's go now to Ms. Pritchett.
I think the screen is frozen.
Okay, she appears to be frozen.
Thank you so much for having, can you hear me?
Yep.
You were frozen, but we hear you now. Still seem to be frozen.
Oh,
here you are.
Great. Thanks for having me here this evening. Okay, great.
Let's go back. Let's go.
Okay, I'm
back.
All right, we'll let her reestablish. Ms. Potts, if you could.
So much for giving us.
She'd like to, I want to.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we'd like to move ahead with Ms. Potts and her 2-minute closer while Ms. Pritchett reestablishes.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to come to this forum. Thank you, Ms. Chatman and the Center for Excellence in Elected Leaders. Ms. Chatman, in one of the forums that I had before, they told me that I needed to show that I was a fighter and not necessarily be so nice. So I apologize if I mishandled the rules right up front. I'm going to give a very clean and fair closing, if I may. I'd just like to ask the voters of District 39 to vote POTS. I'd like to ask you to go in when you get ready to go in on early voting and ask for a special ballot. That is necessary. I feel like the Secretary of State and the governor have given us ample time to participate in this race and let all the voters' voices be heard. Please get out, take somebody with you. I'm Joanna Potts. I can handle this job. I'm well known in this city. How to get in touch with me. You can please reach me on my website and find out more about me at joannapotts.com. I've had the same phone number for 15 years and I welcome all telephone calls. I'll give it here. It's 234-2109. Please vote POTS, get to that ballot box. Thank you, District 39, and thank you all for having me.
All right, thank you, Ms. Potts. Mr. Fort.
All right, guys. So again, my name is Zan Ford, and I'm looking to be the next state senator from the district, 39th district, excuse me. I said it before and I'll say it again. I'm a progressive Democrat. The only thing that I'm concerned with is fighting for working families and the working people of this district. That's it, period, point blank. I have very strong support from many of the unions in this Metro Atlanta area. Specifically, I'm most proud of the Georgia Federation of Teachers, as well as UAW, Amalgamated Transit Union, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. They support me because they know that I will be an advocate for those who are working people, the backbone of not only this city, not only this district, but the state and the nation as well. Again, just to reiterate my platform, I want to see police reform so the bad cops are not moved to the back of the shelf, but we throw them in the trash outright. I want to see expansion of Medicaid so 300,000 people in the state are able to have insurance. I want to see a $15 minimum wage, where some of my opponents may feel like they're anti-minimum wage, anti-worker. I am pro-worker and will do everything I can to increase the outcomes for employment for our citizens. And I want to see that comprehensive civil rights law, one that is inclusive of all people, not just Black and brown folks, not just women, but also our LGBTQ fam as well. I want to make sure everybody has equal protection under the law in terms of employment as well as housing. A vote for me is a vote for working families. You know me, you know who I was raised up under. My father, State Senator Vincent Fort. You know, the elephant in the room, that's my father, but nevertheless, he brought me up in the way that he should. And I'll be a fighter for the people in this district until the day I lose or I die. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fort and Ms. Pritchett.
Let's see if this works. Could you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again for having us here this evening. Again, my name is Linda Pritchett, and I'm asking for your vote for state senator because I believe that what people are looking for is someone that's going to be involved, someone that will be visible, and someone that will be responsive. I started my political career over 10 years ago because Senator Donzella James met me and she remembered me when I saw her again. And she invited me to start participating in the redistricting and reapportionment process. Since then, I have spent a lot of time at the Capitol. I worked as her legislative aide. I also worked for State Representative Sandra Scott, and I also worked as a community liaison for my former opponent, Representative Ronnie Mabra. I have always cared about my community in a way where my actions speak louder than my words. I have organized community cleanups. I have stayed till 1 a.m. at city council meetings, MPU meetings, HOA meetings. We need a state senator that not only has a passion for people and seeing them succeed, but someone who has the relevant job experience of what it takes to pass meaningful legislation at the Capitol. I am a certified paralegal of over 15 years. I am very acquainted with the law, and it's important that we have someone that even understands the difference between civil and criminal. So again, my name is Linda Pritchett. I thank you for this opportunity to present myself to you. My website is voteforlinda.com, and I look forward to seeing you at the polls, and I hope that you. Thank you.
All right, we'd like to thank everybody. We have 4 very capable candidates, and we want to remind everybody to please get out and vote. Early voting is still going on until October 30th. You can also vote by absentee, and of course, the election is November the 3rd. Thank you very much for your time, and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.